I'll just jump in and introduce myself here. My name's Stephanie Ramirez. I am the lead speech language pathologist here at North Kansas City Hospital. And I am excited to talk to you today about the pillars of brain health. And if anyone has ever seen any of my other presentations, I pretty much always include these in the other presentations because they are so important. So I'm very excited today that they get their own moment to shine and really be front and center. You might be wondering, what does a speech pathologist have to do with brain health? Normally, what I tell people is that my scope of practice is pretty much anything from the neck up. So I work with patients on, of course, speech and language, but I also work a lot with patients on cognition and brain health and keeping their brain active. So this is an area that really is near and dear to my heart, and I think it's so important for everyone. So today we are going to be talking about cognitive and brain changes as we age, just things that we might need to be aware of. And then we'll dive into those 6 pillars of brain health, what they are, and then hopefully giving you lots and lots of good ideas for how to incorporate them in your daily routine. And then, as Bree said, we will have time for questions and answers at the end. So let's jump right in. So as a person gets older, changes will occur in all parts of the body, and that includes the brain. So certain parts of the brain, we do expect to see them shrinking, including those important to learning and other complex mental activities. We might see communication between neurons and those synapses, basically those connections between the neurons, be a little bit slower or less effective. We might see blood flow in the brain decreasing. Inflammation might increase. The gray and white matter in the brain diminishes with age. Other changes we might see are things like fluctuating hormone levels, deteriorating blood vessels, and impaired circulation of blood glucose. So that all sounds kind of scary. I want everyone to know, though, that a lot of these changes are very mild, and most people won't even notice too much of a difference. We just see these things on things like brain scans and those types of things. However, there are certain people where we might see it more prominently, and then we would be concerned about other kind of neurological conditions, such as dementia. So I'm going to just put a little caveat in here that dementia is not normal aging, and not everyone will have dementia as they get older. There is a genetic component. If you have an immediate family member with dementia, your likelihood of getting it is increased, but the highest risk factor for developing dementia is age, and that includes anyone who is 65 and older. So there are certain things that we cannot help. We can't help getting older. We can't help what our genetics are. But there are a lot of things that we can help. And a study from the National Institute on Aging in 2020 found that changes in our physical health can really affect our brains, good or bad. So healthy lifestyle factors such as physical activity, not smoking, not drinking heavily, following a Mediterranean-style diet, engaging in mentally stimulating activities, resulted in a 60% lower risk of developing Alzheimer's or dementia compared to people who did not do those things. So this is kind of a preview for what we will be talking about today, but just to say that our brain is part of our body. So if there are changes in our body, we can expect there to be changes in our brain as well. It's not just off in its own little box. It is affected by everything else going on in our body. And so keeping up with that is very important, because I think all of us would love to be what we call a super ager, which is someone age 80 years or older with memory, test scores that are comparable to people 2 or 3 decades younger. And there are so many research studies going on kind of on what sets these people apart. And we're going to talk about a few of those today, because I've actually just read probably 3 articles within the last couple of days that have come out on super aging. And it's very, very interesting. National Geographic is actually doing a whole series on brain health. And if anyone is interested, I would highly encourage you to look those up. It's really, really interesting stuff. And so when we think about super agers, we kind of think about the concept of nature versus nurture. So nature, do these people just start out with bigger, stronger brains? Are they already kind of at an advantage there? Do super agers' brains change to help compensate a little bit better for aging? Those changes that we can expect in the synapses and the neurons, the gray matter, the white matter, are they not having those as prominently as the rest of the population? Do superager brains have stronger defenses against the effects of aging? Again, are they able to cope and compensate for that a little bit better? Or is it more of a nurture situation where they've maybe had more of those enriching experiences? Can that help their brains last longer? Cognitive superagers report more friends and family connections, and we're going to talk about that in the future as well. I think it's a combination of both. And again, thinking about the things that we have under our control, things that we can change, lifestyle changes, that's what today is all about. And the earlier that we can implement these things, the better. I'm 38 years old, and you better believe I'm already thinking about what I need to do to make sure that I am going to be a cognitive superager, because I don't know anyone who doesn't want to be in that category. And so the best way to be a superager is to follow the 6 pillars of brain health, and we're going to talk about each one of these in a lot of detail. The first one is to get moving, physical exercise. The second one is mental stimulation, seeking out mental challenges. The next one is to eat smart, having good nutrition. The next one is to be social. We're going to talk about that. Getting enough sleep is number 5. So we're going to go over some sleep hygiene strategies. And then number 6 is just taking control of your overall health. And that includes mental and physical. So we're going to talk about that as well. So starting out with that physical activity, we know that physical activity increases the blood and oxygen flow to the brain. So when we're thinking about kind of the brain slowing down, as I mentioned a moment ago, having increased blood and oxygen flow can be super helpful. And also just decreasing that inflammation, having things moving through a little bit better, helping managing blood pressure and regulating blood sugar. A moment ago, I just said kind of that blood glucose level in the brain can change with age. And so our blood sugar is very important for our mental clarity. Improving strength, fatigue, balance. Again, people who have physical activity are going to have reduced stress. They have reported improvements in memory, increases in energy. One of the articles that I read here recently had someone remember a list of words, and the people that went for a walk after they remembered them were able to remember more of them than the ones that did not go on a walk afterwards. So maybe something to consider if you're trying to memorize something or commit something to memory, maybe incorporate some of that physical activity and it'll help increase your memory. Some more research behind physical activity connected to brain health. For patients that were going through chemotherapy, physical activity demonstrated as effective as interventions. So those interventions that will help the brain through chemotherapy, the brain fog that's associated with that. So things like yoga, tai chi, qigong were all effective at helping combat that chemo brain that we often see in patients. In 2021, a study showed that older adults with higher level of physical activity showed slower rates of cognitive decline than their peers who were less active. And I know everyone has heard kind of that magical number of 10,000 steps a day. Well, just yesterday I read an article that says that, yeah, 10,000 steps a day is great, but not necessarily the magic number, if you will. Even walking just 7,000 steps a day was associated with 38% lower risk of dementia, a 25% reduction in cardiovascular disease, 28% fewer falls, and the mortality dropped to nearly half, and depression and type 2 diabetes also fell in the age group that they were studying for this Lancet Public Health study. So that was remarkable. So even, just 7,000 steps a day, I would say, if you can, committing to 30 minutes, 5 days a week would be wonderful. But if you're not doing anything right now, just starting slow, maybe you just try for 10 minutes and then you work up to 15 and then finally you're up to 30. Definitely want to give the recommendation to talk to your doctor before you start any kind of physical exercise program, just so that you know that you're doing the right thing for your body. But you can see kind of down at the bottom there, the brain scan showing after sitting quietly versus after a 20-minute walk. After the walk, we're definitely showing more brain activity. So it makes sense to me that people were able to remember better when they incorporated physical activity into their routine. And some other ideas for incorporating physical activity into your daily routine are, first and foremost, find something you enjoy. If it's something you hate doing, you're probably not going to stick with it for very long. So I am like not a runner. If you see me running, you better run too, because something's coming that you want to get away from. But I have found that I really enjoy yoga. I really enjoy swimming. And so I'm incorporating those activities into my weekly routine because they're things that I enjoy doing. I don't dread doing it. Also, just going for a nice walk. I think if you can, having some accountability, doing it with a friend can really be helpful and increase your motivation to try to do it. Also, setting goals or reminders, on your phone or just kind of with a group of friends, kind of thinking about motivating each other and kind of setting that tone for what you want to accomplish. Think about just easy ways of moving your body more. Nowadays, most people have smartwatches, pedometers that can absolutely help with encouragement, reminding you to stand up, reminding you to move around. But really just thinking of those everyday little moments where you're going to be able to be a little bit more physically active. So maybe you park farther away. Maybe you take the stairs instead of the elevator or the escalator. If you're going to have a phone call with a friend, maybe instead of sitting on the couch talking, you walk around your house while you're talking on the phone. So again, it doesn't have to be running a marathon. It can be activities like walking, swimming, riding a bike, yoga, even dancing around your kitchen, anything that you can do to help move your body. And just a little plug, exercise classes can be very helpful, again, for the accountability, the camaraderie. And you can check out NKC Health's events page for all of the physical exercise classes that they offer. There's a ton and they're really fun. I've done a few of them myself. There is a Silver Sneakers program that also offers different access to gym memberships. And the community centers, whether you're in Liberty or Gladstone or anywhere, in the Northland, I've had a lot of communication with those community centers over the years, and they have a lot of awesome programming. definitely something to check out. So thinking about ways that you can just incorporate more movement into your day. Okay. Moving on to the second pillar of brain health, which is mental stimulation. So the main idea of this pillar of brain health is really what we call neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is the brain's lifelong ability to rewire itself in response to new experiences. Excuse me. So the old phrase, you can't teach an old dog new tricks, couldn't be farther from the truth. Our brain is constantly learning and growing and changing according to our experiences. And there was a great quote by a neuroscientist, Maya Shankar. When we learn something new, we are literally building new neurons and pathways. And so if you remember just a moment ago, I was talking about how as we age, sometimes those pathways, those connections, those synapses in our brain aren't working as well, or they're slow. And so by teaching ourselves something new, we actually increase what's called the cognitive reserve. So the cognitive reserve is the brain's capacity to compensate for age-related changes or damages. Thinking back to those super agers, one of the hypotheses was maybe they just have a better cognitive reserve. But if we're able to build that up, it could help you keep functioning even if some of your brain functions start to falter. The other ones can kind of take over and compensate for that. And one article that I literally just read today, I added it this morning. In 2022, in the Frontiers in Aging Neuroscience magazine, they did a study on older adults who received piano training. So they were learning something new, something they had never done before. And after 6 months, those individuals showed improved structural connectivity in brain regions associated with memory and language. So very exciting. Learning the piano actually helped their brain regions and those connections improve. And I think, you know, just the concept of thinking of your mind, your brain like a muscle. Your brain is not a muscle, but it functions similarly to a lot of muscles in the sense that we want to use it or lose it. So we want to try to get into the habit of doing one thing every day that's going to make your brain work. So some of those might be mental math, adding numbers without a calculator. Maybe you're going to the store and you kind of calculate the change in your head, or you have a running total in your head of what you're purchasing. Trying to remember a shopping list or memorizing song lyrics, taking a new route to work. Variety is going to be the key because, again, we want it to be new. We want it to be different. We don't want our brain to have to do the same old thing every single day. So some ideas that can help with that, again, puzzle books are great if you enjoy that, but I would suggest getting a variety puzzle book, not just all of one thing like word searches. Learning new games like board games, card games, jigsaw puzzles, watching a game show on TV and playing along can be a great idea for some stimulation. Hobbies that are very creative and kind of stimulate the creativity in your brain, like painting, art, and music, as we just heard a moment ago, playing the piano. Very, very good for your brain. Learning a new hobby like gardening, cooking, again, playing a musical instrument, writing. I recently read about how they called them, quote, granny hobbies. And I kind of take offense to that because I think a lot of them are things that I enjoy as well. But things like crocheting, knitting, embroidery are actually very, very good for your brain. They, again, have done some research and they found that people that engaged in those activities had stronger brain function. And one of the articles actually hypothesized that it was because of that brain and physical activity happening at the same time. So you're kind of working with your hands, you're doing something physical, and you're thinking, you're using your brain. So if you've never learned how to crochet or knit, maybe now is a great time. Also, in this day and age, we have access to a lot of technology that can be helpful. So there are computer games and apps that you can absolutely take advantage of to train your brain. Some of them require a subscription, things like Lumosity, but some of them are free, so you can kind of play around, find ones that you like. Some other ones that you might have heard of are things like Elevate, Peak, Brain, Fit Brains, CogniFit. And again, I would just encourage you, if you enjoy those, then great. But again, maybe try doing those one day and then the next day reading an article about something you've never read about before. Or maybe the next day you play a card game with your neighbor. So try to mix it up a little bit. Even just little games on the phone can be kind of stimulating for your brain. Again, I wouldn't do them in isolation. I would want to do other things as well, but they can also be included. And just some little ideas. I like to just include this because I think it's one of the most common questions I get. When we're thinking about mental exercise and memory and having the fittest brains we can have, some general strategies are things like writing it down, having a person or device help you remember, following a routine, doing one task at a time. A lot of times our brain kind of falters when we're distracted, when we have a lot going on. And so if you've noticed changes in your thinking and you're concerned about it, kind of think about incorporating these into your day and see if it helps. A lot of shortcomings in memory, like forgetting someone's name, forgetting to pay a bill every once in a while, forgetting, an appointment that you didn't have written down, that's all very normal. We all do that. And so I think some people get a little concerned when they start noticing those things. But again, kind of think about what strategies are you using? What strategies could you try? And maybe that will help your brain function even better. The next pillar of brain health is nutrition. So again, your brain is part of your body. So what we're fueling our body with is really going to fuel your brain. And there is a very close connection actually between your heart and your head. So research has shown that the best brain food are actually the same ones that are going to protect your heart. In 2017, a large long-term study showed that certain heart disease risk factors like diabetes, elevated blood pressure, smoking were all associated with an increased risk for dementia. So again, very close connection between heart and head. Some of the tips that people have recommended as far as nutrition are things like following a Mediterranean diet. There's also a MIND diet you may have heard of, avoiding trans fats, saturated fats, just really eating the rainbow, getting plenty of omega-3 fats, eating 4 to 6 small meals throughout the day rather than 3 large meals. That kind of goes with that blood sugar regulation and making sure that we're not having kind of a blood sugar spike or crash throughout the day. Eating across the rainbow, like I just said, and then enjoying some daily cups of tea. So green tea has actually been shown to be good for your brain as well. I will say that, some of these super ager research that I've looked at shows that they do indulge occasionally, occasionally having that glass of wine or that dessert, the chocolate, because those things bring us joy. You can't cut out everything and expect to be, happy. I think eating is such a social activity as well. So, having those indulgences are fine. I think it's just all about moderation. So that's one of the things that they said was, these super agers, they did indulge, but they didn't do it every day. So thinking about moderation, thinking about how you can help fuel your body, fuel your brain, and fuel your heart at the same time. Another very common question that I get is on supplements. So first and foremost, I think you should talk to your doctor, have blood work done, figure out if you're deficient in anything, and then you can certainly work to help supplement anything that you're deficient in. If you're not deficient, usually just a nice multivitamin is going to be the best bang for your buck. Certainly a lot of research has gone into different vitamins and things like folic acid, B12, D, magnesium, fish oil. Those are the ones that traditionally have been researched as, preserving and improving brain health. There's also research going on things like vitamin E, ginkgo, turmeric. But most of the studies are kind of inconclusive. They're not large enough. A lot of times when you see supplements, I'm trying to think of the name of the one that's always on TV, Prevagen. That's the one that I see quite a bit. You look at the little asterisk down at the bottom. These statements have not been evaluated by the FDA. I mean, these supplements usually are not super regulated. You really don't know what you're getting. They make a lot of claims, but really, again, I think talking to your doctor, making personal decision about the cost and benefits of dietary supplements, also being aware of how they might impact your body with other medications that you're taking is very important. So main point here is that there's no magic pill that's going to necessarily improve your brain, but it's going to be all of these things together. So maybe someday we will have a pill that we can take that will help keep our brains young and active forever. But right now that just doesn't exist. So I would just caution you, anything that sounds too good to be true probably is. All right. The fourth pillar of brain health is socialization. So research has shown that being social, companionship helps keep your memory sharp. It helps improve your mental function by as much as 75%. It also increases quality of life and decreases risk for things like depression and loneliness. And going back to that physical activity, we know it also increases our motivation to exercise if you're doing it with someone. This was one of the studies that I saw. It's cited by the New York Times. They also featured it in the National Geographic series that I was talking about earlier. But when they looked at superagers overall, demographics, lifestyle, diet, education level could all be very different. But one thing that they all had in common was that they tended to be outgoing, gregarious. They maintained active social networks. And that was something that was really exciting for researchers because they thought maybe being social is really the key to positively impact cognitive health. So definitely something to keep in mind. I think that having friendships is very important. Sometimes as we get older, maybe those friendships fade away. So there's a lot of things out there that can help. This senior friendship centers, I've got their logo here on the side. That's a really great group that you can look into. I know NKC Health also has a friend group that meets, but just different opportunities. It can be scary to put yourself out there if you haven't done that in a while. But really focus on the benefits and the potential for creating those lasting relationships. So first and foremost, you've got to commit to spending quality time with other people on a regular basis, whether it's friends, family, or new people. I think all of it is important. Finding something that you enjoy, again, that you can do maybe together or trying something new. I think doing an exercise class can kind of kill two birds with one stone. You can meet new people, you get that socializing, you get the physical activity. If you don't have friends or family close by, even just reaching out, calling, emailing, writing each other letters can be helpful. Volunteering is a great opportunity to socialize with others. I know schools, libraries, community centers, churches, all kinds of opportunities for volunteer work that can be very meaningful and also create those social connection opportunities. In the same token, clubs, social groups, as I said a minute ago, can be great. Local community center, senior center can be an option for people. Also, group classes, like I was saying, at the gym or the community college. Connecting to others via social networks such as Facebook. Sometimes this is kind of a catch-22. I feel like too much social network is probably not very good for our brain, but I think in small doses and when used strategically, social networks can be very helpful and just create a sense of community, even for people maybe who aren't able to get out as much as they used to. Just getting out, getting to know your neighbors, introducing yourself to people, I think is step one. I think especially since COVID, we've become a little bit more secluded, maybe a little more isolated. I hope we're coming out of that now, but we might have to kind of rewire our brains a little bit to be more social. And then think about places where you're going to have more opportunities to see other people. So things like parks, museums, other public places, places where you might also be more likely to run into people who have the same interests you do, because that's really what's going to lay a foundation for a good friendship, right? Somebody who has something in common. So maybe if you're an animal lover, you volunteer at the local shelter, and that allows you to meet other animal lovers, and then you wind up kind of forming these bonds, and you can meet up and have your dogs play together and, do all the things. So moving on to sleep. So the most recent data is that 20 to 40% of the adult population is sleep deprived. So we're not getting the recommended 7 to 8 hours of sleep per night. And when we think about sleep, it's not just quantity, it's not just the hours of sleep that we're getting, it's also the quality. So you might be getting 8 hours, but are you really getting a quality 8 hours sleep? Sleep is very important for our brain and our body. So we know that sleep is very closely linked to things like concentration, productivity, problem solving, creativity, our blood pressure, that blood glucose again, emotional health, immune function, digestive function even. If anyone has children, I think thinking back to those early days when you first brought your baby home and you were not getting good sleep, your brain was probably not functioning as well as it could. So if you're not getting good sleep and it's on an ongoing basis, definitely something that you want to think about addressing. So certainly things like maintaining a regular sleep routine are going to be helpful. Our body likes kind of routine. So I usually recommend going to bed and waking up no more than plus or minus 20 minutes either way from the same time each day. If you're having trouble sleeping at night, try to avoid naps during the day because you kind of have this sleep debt. And if you're meeting that debt during the day, you're probably not going to sleep well at night. If you are in bed, don't stay in bed awake for more than 5 to 10 minutes. I think some people are surprised by that, but we want, again, that routine and your body to associate being in bed with being asleep, not being awake. So if you're laying in bed, your mind is racing, get up. Don't do anything that's going to be really stimulating, maybe sitting in a quiet, dark room, letting your mind race, and then when you feel tired again, going back and laying down. You might have to do that multiple times, especially in the beginning, but that's okay. You're just training your body. And again, we want our body to associate bed with sleep. So we don't want to watch TV. We don't want to be on our phone. We don't want to read in bed because then we're awake. We also want to be cognizant of drinking caffeine, other substances that might interfere with sleep. Exercise can definitely help sleep. Usually they recommend not exercising really vigorously right before bed, but earlier in the day, and then maybe doing some light stretching, things that are going to kind of wind you down. Creating a good environment, so having a quiet, comfortable bedroom. If you're a clock watcher, maybe hiding the clock, and having, again, that comfortable pre-bedtime routine. So maybe it's a shower, maybe it's a little stretching, maybe it's prayer, meditation, whatever is going to help you kind of calm down and tell your body it's time for bed. And certainly if you've tried these and you're still struggling with sleep, definitely worth a conversation with your doctor to discuss what you're doing and maybe what your options are, because we know over time, if you're not getting good rest, it's not going to be good for your brain. And that's a good segue, talking to your doctor, for our final pillar of brain health, which is taking control of your health. And this is mental and physical. So physically, we want to make sure that we're getting our recommended health screenings, we're managing chronic health problems. As we've already learned today, conditions, heart conditions, diabetes, all of that has the potential to impact our brain. Hearing or vision loss should be treated. Some research has kind of linked hearing loss with dementia. And I think, you know, in my view, it's probably because when you have lost hearing or vision, your brain is not getting as much stimulation as it normally did when we were getting all of those inputs. We've taken away a lot of that. We're not hearing half of what we heard before. Our brain is going to get half of the stimulation that it used to get. So trying to stay on top of those things, going to see the ophthalmologist, the audiologist, get those things checked out. Falls, brain injuries can be very detrimental to our brain function. So trying to stay physically active, maintaining good balance, wearing seatbelts in the car, wearing helmets if you're going to be riding a bike or doing anything like that where you have a risk of falling, very important. And then limiting alcohol and tobacco, because we know those also over time and certainly in excess can affect brain function as well. And then on the other side, kind of the mental health stress management piece, we can't, avoid stress. I think life, that's just kind of how life is. But I think being aware of it and trying to take steps to reduce it as much as possible is very important. So pacing yourself, learning to say no. So much of stress is tied to our very busy lifestyles. Treating any depression or anxiety that you may have. If your brain is kind of in this fight or flight mode with depression and anxiety, it's just trying to survive. So those optional brain functions like memory and problem solving and higher level thinking kind of go to the wayside because you're just trying to survive. So addressing these, very important, talking to a mental health therapist, talking to your doctor, kind of planning ahead, setting yourself up for success. Lots of good relaxation techniques out there, meditation, breathing, yoga, again, kind of going back to that physical exercise piece. There are apps now that you can use that can help. Headspace, Calm. Some of them require, again, a subscription. Some of them don't. Some of them have, I know Calm has a lot of content that's free that you can kind of try out. But they, a lot of times will have things for relaxation, but also maybe for sleep. Again, going back to that, if you are struggling with sleep, I know Calm has sleep stories. I had a patient a while back who was using the Calm app and she had sleep stories, and they have a lot of actors on there that use their voices to kind of help because they have a very calm or soothing voice. And so she had Matthew McConaughey reading her a bedtime story every night. And I thought that just sounded lovely. So there's a lot of options out there, and kind of exploring and finding what works well for you, what's meaningful for you. And then finally, giving yourself some grace. If you have a lot of stress happening, we cannot expect your brain to be working as well as it could potentially. And so if you're feeling kind of foggy, if you have noticed some challenges, maybe kind of taking stock of what's going on in your life and giving yourself some grace to say, you know what, it's been a hard week. I'm going to, kind of do some of my relaxation techniques and give myself a little break and say, you know what, brain, you're doing okay with the cards you've been dealt this week, and then move on. And, tomorrow's a new day. So I think having an understanding and an awareness is certainly very helpful and important when it comes to our brain. And so I definitely wanted to leave you with some resources, NKC Health website, events page, all kinds of amazing things happening. We do community health screenings, again, when we're thinking about taking charge of our overall health, education opportunities like this, different support groups, and even, not affiliated with NKC Health, but there are lots of online support groups. Again, social media in small doses can be helpful. There are also a lot of government agencies that are designed to help with healthy aging and just brain health in general. The Office of Disease Prevention and Health Promotion, the National Institute on Aging, the National Council on Aging, all of those things, their websites are just a plethora of different resources. And again, if you're interested, there are lots and lots of articles and research, studies coming out through different, organizations, like I said, National Geographic, things like that. And, the funny thing is, I think our computers kind of learn our preferences. And I know, because I look up so much on the brain, that, anytime I log in, they're like, oh, you might be interested in this article. And I'm like, yes, I am. So, you can learn about, the latest research in healthy eating, sleep hygiene, all of the things. It's all there, and you can have access to that. So I will open it up for questions here in just a second, but I wanted to leave you with a few of my favorite quotes on aging and kind of thinking about our brains. The first one's from Walt Disney. It says, growing old is mandatory, but growing up is optional. I think with these pillars of brain health, we are really focusing on keeping our brains young, active, staying curious. And that comes also with the next quote from Albert Einstein: do not grow old, no matter how long you live. Never cease to stand like curious children before the great mystery into which we were born. We're keeping our brain, we're keeping our body active, curious, we're doing all the things. And then finally, the last quote, there is a fountain of youth. It is your mind, your talents, the creativity you bring to your life and the lives of people you love. When you learn to tap into this source, you will have truly defeated age. And so again, thinking about staying creative, staying physically active, mental activity, staying connected to those people we love, the sleep hygiene, and just taking care of ourselves overall with nutrition and mental health, physical health. That is the pillars of brain health. So I thank everyone for your attention today. And certainly you can ask questions if you have any. I also have my contact information there if you don't feel comfortable putting your question in the chat here. You can definitely reach out to me personally as well. So thank you everyone for your attention today.
Any questions, anybody?
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. Thank you for the info. It is good info. I think that Stephanie would be a wonderful narrator on the Calm app. What do you guys think? She's got a good, chill voice, encouraging, positive vibe about her.
Oh, thank you. I think it comes with the territory.
It does. Yeah, you don't get too flustered with anything.
Yeah.
Right. Well, like Steph said, tons of info on our website, NKCH. Oh, nope. We're not North Kansas City Hospital anymore, guys.
No, it's so hard.
So hard.
It's a brain exercise to remember. NKC Health.
Every single day.
Yep.
NKChealth.org. Events and classes. You mentioned socialization. We do have a program. It's called Circle of Friends. It's for those people that maybe you're new to the area, or maybe some of your friends aren't around anymore and you're kind of looking to make some new friends. I think it's 8 to 10 people come together once a week. They do an activity. they kind of get to know each other, and then you kind of get friendships off of that. So it's a cool program.
It is. I signed my mom up for it, so she
That's what I
actually did
heard.
the last one. Yeah.
I love that. So that's a great program to check into. What else? You're going to get this recording in your email. It also goes up on our YouTube if you want to watch it again.
And one thing I will say, because I know it's a lot of information, it can be kind of overwhelming, and like a lot of people are like, well, where do I start? One thing that I just tell my patients is kind of think about what's going well for me right now, which pillar do I feel like is really strong, and then which pillar is probably my weakest, and then start there and just say, okay, this week I am going to focus solely on my sleep and try to make that as good as I can, and then, kind of expanding from there. Just kind of go one at a time. It can be a lot more digestible than trying to attack all 6 pillars of brain health at once.
That's a great strategy because it does
Yeah.
become overwhelming, right? And then we beat ourselves up. You mentioned on the
Right.
previous screen, give yourself some grace.
Yes,
It's
100%.
okay to not be okay. Right?
It's totally okay. We're all just getting through this thing called life, right?
All right, guys. Well, shoot us an email if you have any questions. Again, Stephanie's contact info is on the screen there. And we appreciate you joining us today. And thank you, Stephanie, for sharing your knowledge.
Thanks. Everybody have a great day.
Bye.
Bye.